I think the entire world has committed to net zero by 2050, and they have defined that North Star, but the frameworks that support companies to directly decarbonise and to get there are still being designed, synthesised, and ensured that carbon leakage doesn't happen and it can't be gamed.
Hello and welcome to The Greener Way. I'm Michelle Baltazar from FS Sustainability. Today we're talking about a technology that sounds almost too good to be true. What if carbon dioxide wasn't a waste product to be stored underground or offset elsewhere, but a raw material that could be turned into concrete, plasterboard, paint, and construction products? And what if the company leading the charge wasn't coming out of Silicon Valley, Germany, or somewhere in Europe, but right here in Australia? So today we are going to get to know this clean tech company called MCi Carbon, which just opened up what it says is the world's first fully integrated carbon refinery in Newcastle. By the end of this episode, we'll find out why investors are paying attention to what the company is doing and whether this innovation could reshape the future of industrial decarbonisation. Joining me today is Sophia Hamblin Wang, co-founder and chief operating officer of MCi Carbon. Sophia, welcome to The Greener Way.
It's a pleasure to be here, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the problem you're trying to solve. Heavy industry, whether it's cement, steel, mining, and chemicals, account for a huge share of global emissions. Yet, they are some of the toughest sectors to decarbonize. And for years, we've heard a lot about carbon capture. I'm sure you've read all the news articles about this. But there's always a question on cost, complexity, and lack of commercial viability. So let's talk about your company. Why does the world need the technology that you have created and it looks like everyone's starting to pay attention to?
So in 2013, MCi Carbon was founded upon the idea that the world could turn CO2 into products and create business models that would incentivize industry to actually capture and do something with their emissions instead of just seeing it as a waste product that would get emitted into the atmosphere. So the IPCC actually released a report that said that mineral carbonation could be a really viable way to store CO2 permanently or in 10,000 years of storage. But there was no global reference pilot or demonstration plant. So we went to the Australian government and the New South Wales government and proposed to scale up that technology right here in Australia because we are really good in Australia at resource processing and turning minerals into new products. And we thought it would be a really great way to use the skills of the mining and minerals industry in order to create the new industries of the transition. And we kind of like to say the carbon industry of the future, using the jobs of the carbon industries of the past.
There's clearly strong interest in what you're building, and you've attracted backing from global companies, major industry players, and as you've pointed out, the government. Who has come on board so far, and what are they seeing in the business? It's like you're an overnight success that took 20 years, right? Like now people are hearing about you. But tell us about your investor base.
A couple of weeks ago, we launched the world's first carbon refinery in Newcastle. So that has taken us quite like an incredible and exciting amount of effort and energy to get here. Let me tell you a little bit about it. So after our first funding from the government and from Orica, which is a mining services company, we scaled the technology from lab to pilot, and that was in 2016, and we have been validating our technology with industry ever since. We then set about designing and building in-house our first demonstration plant, and that locks away 2,500 tonnes of CO2 per annum and creates around 10,000 tonnes of low carbon materials for use in the cement, plasterboard, refractories, paper, and other companies all around the world. We built our demonstration plant and have scaled our technology with the support of some pretty significant global names. Now, I'll start with Europe because our very first next commercial plant will be built in Europe, and that's with the support of $10 million worth of funding US from RHI Magnesita. They are the largest refractories company in the world. They did a global scan of all of the technologies that could possibly decarbonise their operations, and they chose MCi Carbon. They have chosen to deploy the technology fully into their own operations, and the magnesium carbonate that we create from our process is the input material into creating refractory bricks. So we already decarbonise the input material, but we also then take the CO2 emissions that come from their scope 1 and we re-embed it back into the rock that we use as our input material. So it's a double carbon reduction benefit. And actually, our customer is really excited about the business model because we not only create one product that they use in their own operations, but we also create a silica product, which is showing a lot of promise to be used in the cement and concrete and aligned industries. So the technology integration with them shows that they can not only use a low carbon new version of a material, but a whole new profit center as well. And yeah, the product is really high quality. So we're excited about that. We also have investment from a few Japanese giants. And I feel quite confident in saying that the next plant is highly likely to be a Japanese deployment. We firstly took investment from Itochu Corporation, significant Japanese trading house, and they have a keen interest in trading the low carbon commodities of the future. And they've seen MCi Carbon as a platform that will be creating and unlocking those new low carbon commodities. We also have investment from Mizuho Bank, from Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Bank, and most recently from Mitsubishi Ube Cement Corporation. And that's a really exciting one because Mitsubishi Ube Cement Corporation, or MUCC, are one of the largest cement companies in Japan. They also export some cement to Australia. And so we have already this really strong relationship in a bilateral sense. But the Japanese industry and financial institutions and the Japanese government all really understand what it means to decarbonize and what it means to meet net zero. And we have just loved working with the Japanese in general because we can see this deployment as working there. In Japan, people understand the word carbon recycling, which is what we're doing. It's, taking the concept of the circular economy. There's no such thing as waste. It's only molecules in the wrong time, wrong shape, and wrong place. And we at MCi Carbon are just reimagining that CO2, those molecules, as just new building blocks, going from a waste center to a profit center. And the Japanese industrial companies just truly get that.
Congratulations on the take up, and now we know you've got a plant that's going to be built in Europe and another one in Japan. So congratulations. Now, again, I mentioned earlier that you're an overnight success because now we're hearing about this. But what were the challenges in the past? What were the challenges in the last 2 decades that no longer exist today?
We've built a company on the basis that we need to make money. The technology needs to work in that it needs to lock away CO2 permanently and safely. And it also needs to be wanted by society and by the community. And it also needs to be supported by the legislative frameworks that exist in the world. So in 2013, when we started our company, we actually had an emissions trading scheme in Australia. So we had thought that there would be very clear legislative pathways to scale the technology here. And I would say the last 15 years has been fairly uncertain in that way. I think the entire world has committed to net zero by 2050, and they have defined that North Star, but the frameworks that support companies to directly decarbonise and to get there are still being designed, synthesized, and ensured that carbon leakage doesn't happen and it can't be gamed. So I won't say that we have solved all the problems at all, because I think that this next 18 months, a lot is going to happen in the world. There are a lot of mechanisms being designed right now that will support technologies like MCi Carbons to proliferate and scale. But we are in a period right now of relative uncertainty how technologies will integrate in the future. That's why our next plants will be in Europe. There's already an emissions trading scheme there, and in Japan, where there's quite a lot of momentum around the GX ETS. And so it's more clear how our technology will integrate with that.
Certainly, there's been some regulatory uncertainty in the last 2 years, of course, but it seems like the corporate sector is heading in the right direction of moving towards net zero and decarbonizing, regardless of the legislation, for example, or independent of it. But now let's talk about the clean tech that you're offering. What does this tell us about the investment opportunities emerging from the transition of heavy industry? I mean, does this feel like an inflection point to you where now we've got a heavy industry with a solution to decarbonize in the future?
Yes. So what I should have said before is that MCi Carbon's business model does not rely on carbon credits or a carbon mechanism in order to make money and be viable. So we have designed it that way in order to be durable and to not be at the whim of the change of global policies. However, it is a cherry on top of a business model that is already expecting healthy returns above the mid-teens. So we have designed our technology to be easily adoptable by heavy industry, in that we're a bolt-on technology that can be built next door to the emission source, most likely, and then we just take their CO2 and turn it into products on a high level, which means that some of these industrial companies can just use our technology as carbon removal as a service. Some of our customers really they don't really care about the downstream product or the downstream profit. They would rather just have the CO2 off their hands. And that is one of the business models that we will be deploying with our customers. We also have a strong interest from global steel and cement majors. We've tested our technology with basically steel and cement customers from every single major location around the world, and we have very strong techno-economics to show for that. So we expect that in this next 18-month period, there will be an explosion of announcements. Let's just say that, because we have really lowered the barrier to adoption for these companies, where they just need to choose which technology they'll use to decarbonize, and we can basically take it from there We also have quite a significant interest from our debt providers and the potential to interact with green bonds and creating green infrastructure assets in the future. The biggest challenge to date has been running to get to scale, running to build our first-of-a-kind plant, because from then onwards, we're looking at a business model that really stands on its own 2 feet.
Amazing. Our listeners can't see you right now, but I can see like jumping out of your skin in excitement on what's going to happen in the next couple of years. Carbon removal as a service, you heard it here first. Sophia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Have a great day.
No worries. You've been listening to The Greener Way. I'm Michelle Baltazar. Thank you for joining us.
The Greener Way podcast is a product of FS Sustainability. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional, legal, or tax advice. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement, and if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the FS Sustainability website, fssustainability.com.au.